He did stand-up comedy, public speaking, ran his own business. And one day, he was just like, Andy, I've just come out of hospital. I got hospitalized with anxiety. And I was like, what? You? Particularly men, there can be this real mismatch between what they're feeling on the inside and how they want to be perceived. The left has this tendency to sort of annihilate the categories of male and female. There tends to be a lot of pathologizing of masculinity. And then on the right, there tends to be, in a different way, I think, an unhealthy approach to masculinity, which is that we basically just need to turn the clock back. I often work with men who sometimes they're at the point of like they might be getting divorced because their temper is out of control. And what I work with them around is
Welcome to The Unfolding. I'm Olivier and I'm really grateful you're choosing to spend some time with me. My intention is to explore topics about connection, meaning, and staying human in this digital age. If what you hear feels nourishing, you're welcome to subscribe, like, or follow. It's a simple way of supporting my work and helping it reach others. Thank you.
Andy, you've lost a friend when you were 39 years old from suicide. How does it make you live your life differently?
Well, one thing that really struck me, he's called James, my friend who died by suicide. One thing that struck me about him is that there was quite a big mismatch to how I perceived him and how he really felt. I saw him as being really confident. He did stand-up comedy, public speaking, ran his own business, and he'd often be like, Andy, this is how you do sales. I just sold this thing and I charged them so much money. I was like, whoa, what are they going to do? And then they said yes. And I was like, yeah. Like this kind of bravado and confidence. I felt kind of inspired. Like, wow, I'd love to be as confident as that with business. And with dating, he seemed confident approaching women. And had very strong, well thought out opinions, like lots of conviction in everything he thought about Brexit, whatever the topic was. And then one day, he was just like, Andy, I've just come out of hospital. I got hospitalized with anxiety. And I was like, what? You? I had no idea that he struggled to that extent. So it was partly like really hitting home how so often, maybe particularly men, there can be this real mismatch between what they're feeling on the inside and how I perceive them, or how they want to be perceived. And how horrendously badly things can go wrong when somebody isn't being fully honest about their emotions and they feel out of control with how they feel and they just don't know what to do with it. And they feel like he was in a pain, an emotional and physical pain he didn't know how to deal with, or if he would ever be able to get out of it. So I guess it's sort of shown me like the stakes of how important honesty and friendship is, and yeah, how badly things can go wrong when they go wrong.
Yeah, so you're talking about the mismatch, how he was portraying someone so lively and full of energy, advices,
Confidence.
And then that happened. So that must have really rocked your world. I imagine there was a lot of pain that came out of it.
Yeah. I think there's a mixture of pain, and somehow I still couldn't fully believe it. Like when he was talking about being hospitalized with anxiety, I was like, what? No. You're fine. You're James. You're confident. You know, you've got your shit together. Like it can't be that bad. Really?
Do you have regrets?
I think I wish I could have done something more to help him. And at the same time, I don't think that there was. So I don't turn it over in my mind being like, if only I'd said this, if only I'd done that. Yeah. I've actually ended up doing some talks for companies on World Suicide Day with his brother. So we go through the story and how it impacted particularly his brother and the family and the different factors that led up to it. And it's really striking to me that his brother he's so clear that there's nothing he would have done differently. Like he spoke to his brother almost every day. How are you? They had very honest conversations. Was incredibly supportive to him. And he just has this sense of like, well, that was his decision. That's what he wanted. No one could have persuaded him otherwise. No amount of love or more phone calls or more attempts to be supportive or caring or loving would have changed anything. So I think that I also, when we talk about it, it's not like just do these 3 things and you will stop someone from taking their life. There's a sort of like acknowledgement of sometimes there's nothing you can do. There are these things that we know can make people more likely to be suicidal or less likely. But ultimately, as much as we want to be able to stop somebody, we can't. So there's this sort of acknowledgement of our powerlessness.
You said there are a few things that might help.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think those are?
Well, there are some like major things which are known or like statistically are make things worse and better. So if someone has debt, for example, if they have a breakup, if they know someone else who's committed suicide, taken their own life, if they feel a lot of shame and inadequacy, if they feel isolated. And then conversely, if people have strong friendships, strong relationships, a sense of community, effective mental health support, and the word effective is important because sometimes people make things worse, systems make things worse.
How do you find effective mental health support?
Well, it's a big question because sometimes people search through different therapists and they can't find one that helps, or they try talking to friends about how they're feeling and it doesn't make them feel better. So there's definitely not a one size fits all. And I think James was trying different things, different medications, talking to doctors, and just nothing seemed to be working for him. So actually, one of the things that I noticed from having like gone a bit into, researching about suicide is I had this sense of it being like a very sort of extreme behavior. I remember when I was about 11 once thinking, because I felt very lonely at this time in school, if I jumped in front of a car, no one would care. So this one moment where I felt almost like I don't think I would have, it was very serious, but it sort of crossed my mind. And apart from that, it feels like a really extreme thing to get to that point of like, I want to kill myself. But when I look at the things that make people suicidal, I relate to all of them. So feeling not good enough, not being able to deal with your emotions, feeling isolated. I think everybody experiences degrees of that. And it's just that people who get to being suicidal are at the extreme end of the spectrum of it. It becomes a level of shame or a level of isolation that is too painful to tolerate.
Yeah, one thing that I've noticed with me, because I used to have those thoughts quite a lot a few years back, and I know that one thing that was quite difficult for me was to find people that were just able to hear it, because of course I could speak about it But a lot of the time, people would get very alarmed or scared, and it would awaken some of their own pains. And there would not really be much space to actually just welcome it and be like, okay, you want to kill yourself? Well, tell me more.
That's ridiculous when you put it like that.
And actually, that's really what I was longing for, is just to have someone who can, yes, see the gravity of the desperation that I was going through.
Yeah.
But be able to stay cool with it.
Mm.
And I think this is something that's not easy to find.
Yeah. And there is a sort of like, I think it's a fairly widespread fear that if you let somebody, encourage somebody to talk about their suicidal thoughts, it can make things worse. But I think it's very, very, very unlikely. It's much more likely, like you say, to help them feel like it's okay to be me. It's okay to feel how I'm feeling. I can trust this person with what I'm experiencing. But I imagine also for some people, it's just like, oh my God, this is so heavy and scary. And what if I say the wrong thing? And yeah. So did you find that most people you tried to talk to about it were not very able to hear you?
I didn't speak about it so much, especially because I had the thought that that would be something that people would not be able to deal with.
Yeah.
And there are some people too, I spoke about it at one point, and it was very alarming for them. And I had to almost spend the energy reassuring them that I was not going to do it, which I think can be very challenging. I see that also when people have someone who just passed away. When some of my family passed away, I would meet people and they would talk a lot and he would touch their own pain around death and try to reassure me. And I'm like, I'm trying to care for my own mourning. And somehow someone in front of me is trying to feel better themselves.
Yeah.
And so I think that happens quite a lot. And with suicide, it was pretty similar. The idea that, I would speak and then some people would just be so worried about it. And I think it did help that I found some people and even some groups. I think was also speaking about it in group and being able to feel the sadness in front of people and sharing it and not being interrupted. That helped me a lot, but I cannot also pinpoint to like, that's what, saved me. There are so many things that made it that I didn't go that far. I don't think I had a lot of very serious ideas about it, but I had a lot of thoughts about it. And so I can imagine that if I had not received the support that I was needing, maybe things would have gotten worse. I don't know, but I'm here.
I feel sad thinking about you being suicidal. I'm glad you found people that you could talk to about it.
Yeah, now I have the thought that if that was happening to me again, I think I would have quite a lot of choice of people I could speak. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why I'm so glad to be alive, because those connections are so nourishing and such an anchor. When I was hearing you talking about the brother of your friend who was saying, I couldn't have done anything differently. That was his choice. That's what he wanted. It makes sense to me that I would hear that from a brother, because the pain of the guilt must be so high.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, do we just tell that person, well, there's nothing you can do, or
just leave them to it.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? There are things that help, but you ultimately can't control it. So if you are somebody who's willing to talk to someone about their suicidal thoughts, it might make them less likely to do it, but they might still do it. And that's, I think as humans, we're often looking for like the fix or the solution of like, I just follow these steps, then I won't have that problem anymore. So I think it's recognizing like there are things that help. It's not like there's no point trying to be supportive, talk to them about it, be a listening ear. Also, one of the things that Will shares often is we can get into this mode, maybe particularly when someone's in a very extreme place of emotional, mental pain. We want to just listen to them And he's a big advocate of you go first. Like you said, you know what? I'm so stressed at the moment. I'm so anxious about this and that. And that giving them more permission to share with you what's going on for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what you're saying is, if I'm in front of someone who maybe has suicidal idea or is not going well, but doesn't really want to talk about them, maybe me saying the stuff that are challenging in my life will open up the door to vulnerability on the other side.
Yes.
Yeah.
It could be. As you're saying that, I'm like, well, if they're really full of, pain and dread and anxiety, maybe they wouldn't have any capacity to hear you. But if you have the kind of relationship with them when in the moments when they maybe do have a bit more ability to listen, that you are sharing things of your own difficulties as well. I think maybe particularly for men, but people in general, like so much of it is feeling shame that you're struggling. I should be able to deal with this better. I shouldn't be feeling like this. And so the more we can normalize with each other, feeling anxious or depressed or self-hatred or whatever it might be, that hopefully the less stigma there is.
When did you start being interested in men's work and supporting men?
It was around that time, actually. Maybe it was 2019, 2018, something like that. It was actually a psychic I was seeing at the time called Tim. And I sometimes describe it as like reverse therapy. So in therapy, normally, if you're my therapist, you're asking me about me. Whereas as my psychic, you tell me things about me. Andy, you're this kind of person. You have this kind of issue, and these are the blocks that you have. And I'm like, okay, right, interested. So one of the things that he said to me was, you don't have a relationship with masculinity. Like, you have not developed that within yourself. And I sort of checked in with myself. I'm like, is that right? It's quite a big statement, especially to say to any man. And I did think he was right. And I was thinking back to my time at an all-boys secondary school and seeing male behavior as being quite ugly, negative, bullying, homophobic, aggressive, lacking in softness, kindness, empathy, being very hierarchical, like you want to be the cool one. If you're low status, I was very small, physically small. I felt vulnerable for bigger people, bigger, stronger boys. There was like glorification of alcohol. Like, it was so brilliant. It was so funny. I got smashed on 20 pints on Saturday. Like it's some huge achievement to get drunk. And I was just, I sort of compared this in my mind to the girls' school, which we'd get the train home with. And they were just so nice. They were affectionate. They were warm. They were friendly. They would say nice things about each other, whereas we never would say nice things to each other at this boys' school. Not very, very rarely. And then I have a sister as well, and I just saw her as having very different, warmer relationship with her friends, her female friends. And I think on some level, I was just like, masculinity's horrible. Being male is horrible. It's not for me. And so I sort of rejected all the sort of trappings of masculinity in that sense of being competitive or aggressive or money or career orientated, as like, that's not for me.
And then what happened?
So at the time when he gave me this feedback, I was it must have been 2020 because this happened during lockdown. I was running a meditation group called Heart Space, And Heartspace was basically all women, plus our friend Dom. And so I was like, well, I'm going to leave Heartspace. I've been running it for about 5 years. So it's quite a big deal for me to be like, sorry, everyone, I'm not going to do this anymore. And I created a men's group. So I just called up 6 or 7 friends and said, this is what I want to do. I want to explore what it means to be a man. I want us to meet every month, and we're going to talk about, that and just what's up for us, how we're feeling, how we're doing. And it's still going now. So 6 years later, we still meet every month, and we check in about how's life. And it really has helped me both to explore a sort of healthier form of masculinity and also practice opening up with other men and realizing that it could be a safe thing to do where they're actually going to listen and they're not going to take the piss and they're not going to judge me. And it's been a really wonderfully supportive group. Mm. So that was one of the avenues, I guess, of exploring masculinity. And then I tried just doing some other things like doing judo, doing boxing, getting more in touch with my anger, going to the gym. I started going to the gym 2-3 times a week. And actually, that's something I'd always shied away from because I was like, I don't want to be like those gym bros, like people taking protein powder with vests and massive biceps. And they're just like, oh, look at me and my muscles. And very individualistic. This is all my image of it. And I was like, why not? I'm going to embrace that. I'm going to embrace getting bigger and stronger and feeling more masculine. And I actually enjoyed it. I enjoyed getting more in touch with like strength and aggression and assertiveness. I think my partner actually told me that she felt like I after a while was holding myself differently, carrying myself differently. So there was various different ways that I was bringing attention to certain more masculine qualities and seeing if I could embrace them more.
Would you say that these are stereotypical qualities? Because when you're telling me, oh yeah, I chose to go to the gym and started to work out on myself and masculine things, and I'm wondering, is that what it is?
It's always so tricky, isn't it, to define what we mean by masculine and feminine. I guess I'm talking about the stereotypical things that I associated with maleness that I rejected. Mm-hmm. I also run corporate workshops on men's mental health. And I talk about there being these 4 core stereotypes of traditional masculinity that I think they both have a dark and a light side. They can be healthy versions of it, but they're often unhealthily expressed in men. So number 1 is don't be a sissy. Don't be feminine, don't be emotional, don't be a crybaby, vulnerable, all that kind of stuff. Number 2 is be high status, be dominating, be good at sport, make lots of money, have a job, a big job title, things like that. Sleep with lots of people, be funny. Being funny can make you high status. Be independent. You don't need anyone. Like this rugged individualism, not needing emotional support. Be aggressive. And if you need to, be violent. So I wouldn't say necessarily that I was like trying to be less of a sissy or trying to be more violent. But I was trying to embrace perhaps the positive side of some of these things of like, I'm going to lean into strength or aggression more than I was before. Not to say that women can't be strong or aggressive.
How did that work out for you?
I feel like it made me more whole, more integrated. Maybe less afraid of men as well by embracing these male qualities in myself. or less judgmental as well towards men. Like if instead of seeing a man who's like, I go to the gym and that's important to me, or I want to make a certain amount, a big, I want to have a big salary and being judgmental. I was like, great, go for it. I respect that. That's important to me too. Whereas before I might have been more like, ugh, why is that important to you, you doozer?
So it's almost like you went towards the thing that you were judging as bad, started to embrace them, and you saw that it was actually supporting you.
Absolutely, yeah.
In one recording I've heard of you, you were speaking about the difference of how masculinity is viewed by the left and the right, and I thought it was fascinating. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yes, I find this really interesting as well. But so these, if I talk in generality, so not everyone on the left will think like this, and not everyone on the right will think like that. But generally speaking, the left has this tendency to sort of annihilate the categories of male and female, and they just think of it, we're just people. There are no differences. Gender is just a construct. And there tends to be a lot of pathologizing of masculinity, like men are bad, they're dangerous, toxic masculinity, a lot of talk about that. And they see this badness, this toxicness, even the things around, men representing 75% of all suicides, as being the fault of individual men making bad decisions. Men not being emotional enough or vulnerable enough or in touch enough with their feminine side or willing to go to the doctor. It's their fault. It's there. It's available. They could choose to do it. They choose not to do it. That's on them. And one of the things I find interesting about that is that, generally speaking, the left focuses on collective problems and solutions. So if there's poverty, the left would say, we need to invest in education. We need progressive taxation. The right would say, if you're poor, you need to work hard, as a generalization. Whereas with masculinity, instead of having this generalized problem, a generalized solution, like how can we as a society support men? Almost uniquely in this topic of masculinity and men's mental health, they individualize their responsibility. They don't think, how could we change the education system? How could we adapt the workplace or the healthcare system or the messages we have about mental health to suit men better, to, as a society, support men better? And then on the right, there tends to be, in a different way, I think, an unhealthy approach to masculinity, which is that we basically just need to turn the clock back. That the problems have all come from what the left have trying to feminize men. And if they go back to being rugged, tough, the provider, the wife and two kids, with maybe the homemaker wife, that will solve all the problems that we have around men's mental health. So I don't think either the left or the right has a good solution or a good diagnosis of the problem, basically. Yeah.
So what do you think is the right solution for men?
I think it's important to acknowledge that there are differences. In general, as a whole, there are tendencies in common with men and women. And also that we can challenge changes that happen in society, but I don't think the right thing to do is we all need to turn the clock back to the 1950s version of how men and women should be. The challenge, I think, is that the answer, or what helps men, is actually quite nuanced. It's like, how do we support men not to be as one particular way, a 1950s man or someone who sees gender as a construct, but how do we support men to feel free to be themselves, however that might appear, whether that is being like a jock, who's really into sport, or who's into ballet, or who's into empathy, how do we support and encourage men to feel safe to do whatever they want, to feel however they want, to not be like, there is this model of how they should be. And if you're like that, you should feel totally ashamed of yourself. And you're dangerous and toxic and bad. Don't be like that. Do be like this. And I think that is why things like men's groups can be so powerful and liberating for men, because they can show different models of how people are showing up as men. And they can normalize all kinds of different expression, and they can normalize men having problems that they talk about, emotional issues, relationship issues. And so it's like a context in which I feel men can gradually feel safer to be themselves in their own unique expression.
I really like hearing you say that. For me, it's really been a journey to find how I want to embody my own masculinity. And I was definitely more pointed towards the way the left understand things, because identifying as queer, I was just more welcomed in this kind of environment and mindset and culture. And I also noticed that there was many of these views that were not fully helping me realize myself. And I had to dig a little bit deeper and not try to be what was the general idea of what some people think what being a man is like, and what's the problem of men. And I had a lot of enemy images towards men. And in my experience too, men's group have been very helpful for that. To just hear men speaking with vulnerability of what they're actually experiencing, that changed the way I was perceiving them. Because what I knew was men that were showing off all the time and bragging or being violent. And that's really the stereotype of the toxic masculinity is a lot of what I understood of what being a man was. So I didn't want to be a man if it was to be like that. The moment I experienced men really being vulnerable and caring with one another, that changed my view of masculinity.
Beautiful. Yeah. What enemy images did you have of men?
Mostly the biggest one is something like, men will not be there for me when I need it. Women will be present. Women will listen. Women will have physical closeness. But if I need anything, men will not have it.
Wow.
If I need anything that's vulnerable.
Yeah.
Does that resonate with some of your story?
It transports me to being 20 years old and in the kitchen in my shared house at university and telling my friend I'd just broken up with my girlfriend, and I was really upset about it. And he just went, "Shit, mate," and then walked out the room. And I was like, "Mate, there was zero support." It was like, "What? Where did you just go? What just happened?" And I'm imagining he just didn't know what to say. He didn't know what to do. He felt uncomfortable. I did have another housemate who was like, "Tell me all about it." Like, he was really great. Sat down and really listened to what was going on, and I really appreciated that.
Today, why do you want to help men? What's your main motivation? Why is your passion there?
I think there's a few things. I think it's quite a natural human tendency if you've struggled with something and then made some progress with it, or you feel better about it, that then you feel motivated to help others with it. So I feel like I have made some progress with being more willing and able to be myself, as opposed to being constricted by these masculine stereotypes. And so, and there's that feel about sharing that process, that journey, the things that helped me with other men. Also, like, it's creating the kind of world that I want to live in. I don't want to live in a kind of world where there are lots of men who aren't honest about how they feel and don't have very genuine friendships or connections with people. And there's all this bravado and drinking and fakeness. Like, that's not the world I want to live in. Those aren't the kind of friends I want to have. Right. And then also, as I've developed my workshop on masculinity, and I've created an online course for it as well, I feel a sense of pride that I'm able to approach this topic, which can be so polarizing and such a hot potato issue where people get triggered and angry and cancelled and all the rest of it, that I've done maybe 20 or 30 of these corporate workshops where often people are very, very sensitive to anything that is offensive. And only once has anyone ever said they had an issue with what I shared, and they left because I'd said something insensitive. So there's a kind of pride in being able to almost like dodge around or navigate all the potential landmines in talking about men and masculinity and introduce it to people, engage people with it in a way where men will often come away from these workshops saying, like, I feel motivated to join a men's group or meditate or express myself more or ask my friends, how are you really? And that gives me this great sense of kind of excitement and meaning and joy that they feel inspired in that way. And then I also love that women come away being like, I feel like I understand men better and the reasons why they are the way they are and what they struggle with. And I'm going to ask my dad, how are you really? Or I'm going to be more supportive with my brother, things like that. So it's that sense of being able to talk about this issue in a way that touches people and inspires them to have more empathy for the men in their life. I love being able to do that. And in recent times, I've decided it's actually a little bit too broad a focus to want to be supporting men, because obviously that's 50% of the entire world. And I've homed in on male leaders in tech and finance. I thought about what one of my ideal clients that I worked with 10 years ago, and based on that, decided this is going to be my niche. And one of the things that I notice about those three cultures, leadership, men, tech, and finance, is that one thing they can all have in common is that people in those cultures, in those roles, can often feel a pressure to not be themselves. Like, as a leader, I need to have all the answers. As a man, I need to not show my emotions. As someone who works in tech, I need to conform with this tech-focused culture that isn't maybe not so much about human connection and talking to the end user or having really close relationships with your team. People are often promoted into leadership roles in tech companies because of their tech skills, not because of their human skills. So they're not necessarily great at creating cultures which are welcoming and psychologically safe and people feeling like they can really be themselves. So it's almost like I wanted to find an intersection of cultures where these masculine stereotypes of don't be yourself, close off your emotions, don't connect deeply with people, show up the most, and target that as like my ideal client.
So what you're saying is people that are in these corporate environments with a lot of rules, they're very good at computer numbers, and that's why they're being hired, but they don't have the emotional intelligence to actually thrive humanly, and you come into play to support them.
Some of them don't. I don't want to say that none of them do. But they can all, as we can all improve in these areas, and a lot of them struggle. I talk to a lot of people in these kind of roles, and they share about struggling with overwhelm, burnout, isolation, having so many spinning plates and so many priorities they don't know what to focus on, thinking about work all the time, being awake at night, thinking about it, struggling to be present with their kids because they're thinking about work so much, they can really find the weight of the responsibility all consuming. Like they use this phrase, one person used the phrase, work swallows you up. And it is at the same time as feeling this huge weight, which could be a responsibility of people's jobs, millions of pounds worth of company. They also can sometimes feel like there's no one I can share that with. I can't offload. I can't talk. I don't want to share it with my partner, my wife. I don't feel safe to talk to people in the company about it. So it's like they're carrying this huge burden privately. And for some people, that's really painful and really challenging.
It touches on the topic of loneliness with men.
Already, without the masculinity culture, they have jobs which are very high responsibility and therefore easily can become stressful. Managing people can be stressful, big budgets, complex projects that they're trying to deliver. And then if you layer on top of that pressure and responsibility, I'm not allowed to have emotions. To admit that I'm overwhelmed is weakness. Even showing I care about somebody could be perceived as weakness because I need to be tough and ruthless. I can't have close relationships with people because that might be seen as weak, or maybe I need to fire them at the end of the year because they're not performing well enough, so I can't get that close to them. It just layers on this extra pressure onto already a very tough situation that they have.
So how do you do when you're in this kind of position and you want to have some kind of a human approach to a high pressure job? What's the path to that?
Well, when I first started with working with leaders in the corporate world, I wondered if maybe you need to not have a human approach. Maybe you need to not show your vulnerability, not share your emotions, be tough, be aggressive, be a bit cold, be backstabby. And that's how you rise up the ranks and deal with the pressure of the job. When I started coaching leaders and introducing them to mindfulness, self-compassion, encouraging them to be more accepting and kind towards themselves and develop more empathy with the people around them, I wasn't sure if that would actually help them at work. I knew from my own personal experience and working with other people outside the corporate world that these kind of practices, these kind of paths that you can go down are great for well-being, happiness, peace of mind. But do they maybe make you lose your edge in a very competitive corporate world? And I remember this one particular leader, it was actually a woman that I was working with who was known as the Ice Queen. She was seen as so cold at work. And she was incredibly self-critical. So she was impatient and critical with the people around her, but as is often the case, she was her own strongest critic. And as she, through the coaching, developed more self-compassion and acceptance and warmth towards herself, she started to smile more at her colleagues, be more friendly and welcoming when people came up to her desk. She actually put a post-it note that said smile on her desk to remind her not to glare at people, but instead smile at them when they came up to her. She said when someone in her team made a mistake in a presentation, normally she would just give him a bollocking, but she sat him down and said, what went wrong and how can I support you to do it better next time? She gave a presentation where she said, I was making people laugh, Andy. I was cracking all these jokes. I never normally do that. It felt great. And she got a promotion. She got the pay increase. And for me, there was something really motivating and inspiring about seeing that actually being warmer, kinder to yourself, kinder to the people around you, maybe not in every corporate context, but this was a very hierarchical, white male dominated financial services company. And in that culture, being kinder, more empathetic, helped her to be a more effective leader and feel better at herself. So that's the kind of work that I love doing with people, like where it seems like, so coming back to your question of how in these kind of contexts you be more human, I guess the first thing is you're identifying that you want something to change, that actually, not necessarily that you want to be more human, but maybe you want to find ways of work feeling less stressful or less heavy, or you want to be able to climb to the next level, but you're not sure how to do it. And then what I would do with people is look at the ways where they are preventing themselves from being more human. So often they have a whole set of beliefs, like if I show emotion, they'll think I'm weak. I have to do everything myself because I can't admit it's too much. Or if I delegate to other people, they won't do a very good job. If I show how I really feel, I'll be judged for it. They'll think I'm weak. So identifying what are the layers, what are the sort of masks that they're wearing, maybe not even without fully realizing it, that are getting in the way of them being human, and that it's costing them. It's costing them energy. It's draining to carry these beliefs around and feel like I can't be fully myself. It's probably costing them sleep, stress, tension in their body. It's making them probably feel more isolated. And what happens then is as they start to try out being a bit more themselves, maybe doing some meditation, making more time for themselves, being kinder to themselves, because they're doing coaching, they're also getting this regular support where they can actually be honest about how they're feeling and talk about their pressures in a human-to-human way. It becomes a positive feedback loop where they're like, oh, this is helping. This is making me feel better. This is greasing the wheels at work. This is making my relationships with my team feel better. I have a clearer mind. I did a presentation and I didn't panic so much. I stayed calm. So it becomes a self-perpetuating thing when they start to see the benefits of it. But I think at the start, they can have this fear of like, well, if I'm more myself, if I am more human, it will cost me.
So you came from the place where you were not sure if actually being more human and kind and compassionate with people and smiling would help. And in your experience, you've seen that happens. And now you bring that to men in tech. What is some of the common threads that you see between those people?
They're often people who are very driven. They want to have a well-paid, not necessarily high status job, but they want to move up the ranks. They value stability and security. They're often very conscientious and sometimes perfectionists and people pleasers. And all of that can feed into burnout and overworking, feeling overwhelmed because they're trying to do everything for everyone. They often struggle with boundaries, with self-care, with saying that's enough, or this is what I need. This is what I want. They often take things very personally, blame themselves if something isn't going great at work, and that increases the pressure on themselves. And whilst they do value their job title and their salary, I would say pretty much across the board, it's not the only thing that they value. They value getting the best out of people, managing a team. They want to have a sense of legacy, of contribution, of like the work that I'm doing isn't just about profit, or it's not just about my pay packet. I'm making a difference, whether that's through supporting my team to develop or the end result of what my company is trying to do.
There are a lot of men who struggle with anger.
This is something that I've really struggled with in my life. I had this very strong story that it's not okay for me to tell you I'm angry with you. I have a very strong default towards being affable, amenable, people pleaser. So if I'm angry with you and I tell you, even a few levels down, like, oh, Olivier, it's so annoying the way you wear that orange jumper. I hate that orange. I really don't like that orange color. There's something really strongly in me be like, you can't say that because then he won't like you. It'll damage our relationship. So even if I really don't like your orange jumper, I couldn't say it. And I've really consciously tried to, a bit like with the masculinity, embrace being able to say it and take the risk of saying something's frustrating, annoying, feel angry. And I think it's a tricky one because at the same time, it's really unhealthy to repress anger. I think it can cause us all kind of physical and emotional problems. At the same time, if you just say to someone, well, if you feel angry, just let loose, and, you know, it's fine to just be screaming at someone because they've upset you. It's probably not going to be good for either of you if you just unleash on somebody. So I guess what I try to do is to share if I'm really angry or frustrated with someone, is talk to somebody else first and get it off my chest in a maybe an unfiltered way. And then when I'm a bit calmer, come back to the person I'm annoyed with and still express myself, but maybe there isn't the same charge of like, I'm so annoyed with you right now. I love working with people around anger. I often work with men who sometimes they're at the point of like they might be getting divorced because their temper is out of control. And sometimes they're even being violent, like pushing their partner against the wall, grabbing them because they're trying to walk away, and their partner feels scared, and they're even saying, "Yeah, maybe we should get divorced." And what I work with them around is trying to understand what's underneath the anger, which is particularly men, there can be this real mismatch between what they're feeling on the inside and how I perceive them, or how they want to be perceived. Often fear, like I'm afraid you're going to leave me, so I'm going to grab onto you really aggressively. And an inability to regulate their emotions. So I will often introduce them to meditation as a way to calm themselves down in general. And they often don't know how to say what it is that they're feeling that's not in this kind of aggressive, angry way. So I'll encourage them to say, you know, when you are texting your ex-boyfriend, instead of stop fucking texting your ex-girlfriend, being so aggressive, encouraging them to say it a bit more vulnerably, be like, I feel scared that you're not actually committed to me. And I really want to trust that you are, that this is the relationship's going to last. I sort of feel threatened by you texting your ex-boyfriend. So finding ways to communicate in a more connecting way rather than a disconnecting way. And it really works. It really helps people to kind of recover their relationship from the brink of breakdown. I think that often when we're angry, we want something, right? We want something to change. Like, I'm so like it's a bit of a classic example, but I'm so angry that you keep leaving your plate in the sink, not you don't clean it. I want you to do something differently here, but if I express it with aggression and anger, it probably makes it less likely I'm going to get what I want, because I'm going to get a defensive response or an aggressive response. So it's also counterproductive a lot of the time. You're less likely to get the result you want when you come with aggression.
Yeah, but when you say 10 times nicely, then what do you do?
For fuck's sake, I've said it 10 times! How many more? Yeah. They say it's not a boundary unless there's consequences. I don't know. And that's the nature of long-term relationships. Like, there's plenty of things that my partner said to me more than 10 times that she wants me to do differently, and I still, whoops.
What about if you're in a situation with a colleague that is, let's say I have a colleague that is constantly putting a pile of paper on my desk and I tell him, don't put the pile of paper on my desk, I'm being very nice. And then it keeps on happening and happening and happening. How do I deal with this? Because obviously I'm going to get angry.
I would suggest trying to come with curiosity, like what's happening that you keep doing this, because maybe you might have the assumption they're doing it because they want to wind you up. They don't care. But then maybe there's something else going on. Maybe they forget, or maybe they just have this unmanageable amount of paper and they don't know where else to put it. So trying to understand where they're coming from as opposed to using aggression, I think, is normally more effective.
So your idea is that if men were embracing their curiosity a lot more, the world would be a better place.
I think so. Yeah. I think at the heart of a lot of conflicts, including global conflicts, wars, there is a lack of curiosity about the other person, the other country, the other leaders, about what they really want, what's really going on for them, what their fears are, why they feel so aggressive in this particular situation.
There has been the hashtag #MeToo movement, and now it seems like people talk a lot less about it, but there's still anger from women towards men. How do you navigate it when you meet people that are holding a lot of pain towards the other sex?
It feels a little bit abstract because most women in my life, I have quite a few female friends. I don't experience them as being anti-men or afraid of men or thinking all men are bad. I do hear and read anti-men sentiment, like men being dangerous or useless. And I like to challenge it as prejudice when it comes up, but it's not that often. Maybe it's more like seeing it online. Sometimes it can bring up a kind of defensiveness in me of like, I want to stand up for men. Like, we're not bad. We're not the bad guys. And when people are talking about things like toxic masculinity, I feel quite sort of protective of men when those sorts of terms are being used.
What does it touch in you?
The idea that because I'm a man, there is something in me that is just naturally toxic and evil, bad. And a fear that other men will be affected negatively like that. Like it'll associate in their mind masculinity with something harmful and make them more likely to feel ashamed to be male. I think it's kind of a lazy term as well. It hides a huge amount of nuance. I think what it's probably trying to point to is behaviors like men, well, at extreme end, men raping women. Maybe the less extreme, suppressing emotions, showing vulnerability, lacking empathy, being overly aggressive. I think lumping all of these complex and wide-ranging behaviors into one term, toxic masculinity, it's sort of lazy journalistic shorthand. You're not really saying what you're against. And at the same time, you're running the risk that men in general feel attacked and blamed. And like there's something in them that's poisonous. And I really don't like that.
If you're facing a situation where someone is having an attack towards men and naming how men are perpetrators and that women are the victim, how do you navigate that?
Good question. Around the time of the Sarah Everard murder, we were talking about this with some friends, and one friend was coming very much from the point of view, it seemed to me, of like, it's really not okay that women don't feel safe and men are the problem, men are dangerous. And I felt really angry hearing her say that and defensive. Like, just because I'm male, you are associating me, you're putting me in the same box as someone who's willing to rape and murder someone in the most horrific circumstances. And reflecting on it afterwards, I thought it was kind of ridiculous that we'd had an argument about it, because ultimately we both want the same thing. We both want women to be safe. And I was reflecting that when you start making these blanket statements about men, it actually gets in the way of what we're all trying to achieve. Because if we go into this defensiveness between men and women, or passing the blame around and huge online arguments around it, rather than really looking at, okay, well, what makes this small number of extreme people attack women in public, violently or sexually? Like, it's not, there was this big backlash against. So there was the backlash that was like, not all men, stop blaming us. And then there was the backlash against the backlash. Just stop being so defensive and saying it's not all men. It is a lot of men. Just shut up and listen to the fact that we are feeling unsafe and scared and angry at how men behave in large numbers. So I think that by making these kind of blanket statements and generalizations about men being dangerous, you miss looking at the specifics of what actually triggers a human being to do these horrific, violent acts. And maybe it's very specific to each individual, but maybe there are things that we could learn from in more general terms about, you know, the culture that there is at work, or people's childhood, or what happens at school. But if we make these blanket criticisms of men, I think it just gets in the way of addressing the core issue.
What's the core issue?
Well, in the Wayne Couzens case, it seemed to be that there was a culture in which he was openly talking sexually and violently about women and no one was calling it out. And he'd done things in the past that made him seem like a risk, and he wasn't being monitored. Like, there were specific things in his situation that weren't being addressed. I know that some people will say, well, okay, but it's not just a few bad apples. Almost all women have a story of being harassed, being attacked physically, sexually. So what is the core issue? We need to have more willingness to listen to each other. Women being able and listening to the male perspective on why they think these attacks happen and what can be done to prevent it. And also men being willing to listen to women about what scares them and what support they want from men. Because I think the majority of men, certainly the majority of men I know, absolutely want women to be safe and want to support women in any way that they can.
So what you'd say is it's mostly when there's this blaming and accusation that comes up, that it seems like men don't want to help, but when men are being asked, they're willing to help. That's what you're saying?
I think that there's a kind of a deep wound that many men feel around not knowing their place in society, feeling useless, feeling like, what does society, what do women want from me? And I think most men would probably respond quite positively to be like, this is specifically what we want from you. This is how you can help me feel safe.
A lot of men are lonely these days. A lot of men spend a lot of time on the internet. They have now AI, porn, AI girlfriends. How does it look like for men to actually have meaningful and healthy friendships?
Well, I feel like this topic is very live for me at the moment because I recently did some coaching on my relationship with friendships. And I have been struggling with it, actually. I'm someone so when I was at school, I basically just had one friend, a guy called Chris Cheeseman, and I felt very rejected by my peer group of 120 guys. And then I feel like I sort of swung the other way. Maybe I was overcompensating and wanted to be friends with as many people as possible. And I often feel this sense of overwhelm of like, there's so many WhatsApps and so many people I'm trying to arrange to see and make time for, and I can end up feeling guilty. that I'm not making enough time for enough people. And there's a sort of default of, if someone wants to spend time with me, I have to say yes. So then I'm sort of spreading myself out very thinly. And I have this kind of fantasy of the TV show Friends, where I've just got 5 core friends that I see all the time. We all know each other. And therefore it feels less dispersed and less sort of shallow friendships, shallow connections, because I'm just not seeing people very often. Which it did feel a bit like during COVID, because I moved in with my mum, dad, sister, and partner. We had this, there was something nice about this concentration of focus and energy. And then when we unlocked, I went back to being quite like dispersed. And I invited about 50 people to my 40th birthday last year. And I felt this simultaneous sense of like, oh, it's so lovely that I've got so many friends and people who love me and want to celebrate my birthday with me. And like, oh my God, how am I sustaining relationships with 50 people? No wonder I sometimes feel overwhelmed by trying to do that. And in this coaching session I did recently, I was kind of for the first time, maybe I've done this before, thinking about what do I want from a friendship? What makes a friendship feel nourishing to me? Almost as if like I was giving myself permission for the first time to choose and be like, this is the kind of person I want to hang out with. This is the kind of person I don't want to hang out with. And what I came up with is I don't want to be around people who have a very strong victim mindset and complaining all the time and nothing's their fault. I don't want to be hanging around people who are very high drama and there's always some massive problem going on in their life that's, again, not their fault. I don't want to be friends with people who, if somebody gets upset, either one of us, they're not willing to talk about it. And I don't want to be friends with people who just talk at me. They just talk and talk and talk and talk, and they don't even seem to care if anyone's interested. And conversely, I love being friends with people who are good listeners, who also have something to say, but we have a balance in the conversation, where there's a sense of fun and lightness and laughter, as well as depth and seriousness, and being willing to talk about what's difficult, upsetting, challenging in life. And I also really love being around people who are pursuing their dream in some level, who are doing something that they are passionate about in life, as opposed to their job just being a paycheck.
As a child, you really experienced loneliness, and there were moments where it was really hard for you to make friends. There was a lot of boys around you, but nobody was actually really your friend.
I would say that was most strong between 11 and 15.
What's your memory of that when you speak about it?
Very sad, lonely, painful time where I had this very strong sense of there's something wrong with me, that people don't like me, but I don't know what it is. Almost like if they could just tell me, you need to be more like this or be more like that, I would do it so that they liked me, but I just didn't know what to do.
What do you think it is? What do you think it was? Do you have a different idea now that you're older?
At the time, I was sort of blaming other people for not connecting with me or liking me. But maybe I didn't do a great job of being like, hey, John, do you want to hang out? I like you. I don't think I sort of reached out very much or were drawn to, I wasn't drawn, maybe I don't know, allow myself to be drawn to the people that I wanted to hang out with. So I wonder if there was a certain amount of kind of blame or self-pity. Like they should want to come to me instead of me going to them. I wonder if there was some element of being more in touch with my feminine side and then feeling threatened by that, or that I didn't like that. There was something, I think there was a judgment I had about myself, which maybe wasn't true, that I was uncool. And part of being uncool was being very small. My voice didn't break until I was 15. I certainly lacked confidence, and I think confidence most people find attractive. So yeah, I guess it would be kind of interesting to like get 10 people from my class and be like, what did you think about Andy? Because I don't really know. I don't know what they would have said.
What is it that caused the switch from a place where you didn't have many friends, and then you were speaking about having those 50 people as your birthday? What changed?
Well, when I got to, so I went to a different school for sixth form, and I had the experience of having friends, but they weren't people I really clicked with. I was just grateful to have anybody, and I sort of joined this group. I think it really changed when I got to uni, and I think maybe I felt a bit more confident in myself. I matured physically. I was noticing that women found me more attractive than when I'd been younger. Maybe it was also because it was university and people were a bit freer to express themselves. And I was like part of a group of friends that I liked more. That first year of uni, there was this sense of like an abundance of friendships and relationships, and I could choose to be friends with people I liked and spend time with them. I can't really explain why that shifted, other than it was just a different context where the social dynamics were all kind of reset because it's a fresh start at university, and I was older, I was more mature, I was a bit more confident. I don't know, but that felt like the real turning point for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can really resonate with the not having many friends as a kid and then really wanting to have many later. The memory you shared, it reminded me that when I was turning 25, I had about 60 people that came to a birthday I hosted in China.
Wow.
When I was living in China, and I loved it so much. And one of the things I said, I did a little speech, and I said, I'm so grateful, guys, because when I was a kid, I really wanted to have many friends, but I didn't have many. I felt lonely a lot of the time. And now here you are, and I'm very touched.
That's pretty much what I said at my 40th birthday. Yeah.
And I also resonate with the place of, how do I deal with so many friends? I really want to keep strong, meaningful friendships and care for each of them. And I have a job, and I have many jobs, and I have a partner and a family, and I want to travel, and I want to go to the cinema. How? Yeah. So for us, we seem to have an abundance of connection as men. And I really feel for knowing how many men are lonely right now and are struggling to have just one friend that they can actually share a moment of honesty and authenticity with. And when you were talking about the men's group idea, that's something that I really encourage and want to push a lot, because if you have no friends, go in a place where you're going to be able to show your true colors, so the people that you will connect with will actually be able to connect to the true you. And it seems to me that a men's group is somewhere where that can happen.
Yeah, I think that's a good piece of advice for someone who's lonely. Go somewhere you feel like you can be yourself.
Yeah. So Andy, what's your vision about your business from now on?
What I feel excited to do in my work is to be running leadership retreats and peer-to-peer leadership groups that the coaching work I do feeds into, that is helping people to become excellent leaders who are able to be fully themselves, lead from the heart, lead from what they care about, be themselves, connect deeply with their colleagues, have a strong connection with purpose and meaning in their work. To be running these retreats in like a beautiful place in Portugal by the sea, where people can relax and be themselves. But also lead in a way that feels more effortless. There's something I'm reflecting on at the moment about effortless leadership and how for so many people it feels like this huge burden. And learning to be more yourself, learning to delegate and trust and empower other people that you work with can make it feel a lot more effortless. So wanting to develop this leadership consultancy that helps to bring about a more human-centered form of leadership, which I feel is so needed everywhere I look, whether that's politics, the NHS, the police, banking and tech. There seems to me to be a real lack of both effective leadership and also cultures that people feel like they can be themselves in within the organization, like a healthy working culture with psychological safety where I can turn up and I can make mistakes and be myself. Like if we had 10% more of that in our culture and our society, so many things would improve. So that's where I feel excited to put my energy in helping people to become the kind of leaders that can lead the kind of organizations and create the kind of cultures where people can thrive and the outcomes are so much more positive in terms of what the company or the organization is actually trying to achieve, both the outcomes for the people working there and what they're trying, how they're trying to, the product or service that they're creating.
I will be putting your details in the link at the bottom here that you can find. And I will put your website and socials. Your whole point of view and the way you see masculinity and society, I really like it. And I want there to be more of these kind of voices in the world and speaking about men so that there can be more, I want to say, care and empowerment and a healthy form of masculinity, which is unique and different for everyone. So thank you so much for doing that. And thank you so much for spending this time with me today.
Amen to that. You're welcome, Olivier.